Hello everybody, this is a video that's going to be all about looking at how long it takes to paint a miniature, which is a bit of a stupid question, admittedly, because it's a bit like saying how long is a piece of string, because if you're going to paint a miniature that's for a competition or display or something, then obviously that's going to be a long time. But if you're going to paint a miniature that's just a game, you want to get it done fast, and you just want to play with it as fast as possible, that's obviously going to be a lot quicker. What this is about is how long does it take to paint a miniature to a reasonable tabletop standard. So it's not going to win any awards, but it doesn't look like a mess. It's not just for the sake of playing a game. It looks alright. And the reason I thought I'd do this is because this is a question that a lot of people ask, or it was a question in my mind when I first started. It was, alright, I'm going to spend a bit of money, I'm going to invest a bit of time, but I don't really know how much time I'm going to have to invest in this to get an army together or a collection of any kind. I just don't know how long it will take me. So you're going in blind, essentially. And I'd look at pictures of really good miniatures and think, well, they look fantastic. How long does that take? And then I'd look at pictures of miniatures that were decent on tabletops and think, well, they look really good, I'd like to paint that. How long does that take? Don't know. You don't know until you try it. But I suppose this is going to be a demonstration of how long it takes me to paint a miniature to a fairly decent tabletop standard with a little bit of experience under my belt now after 3 years. And in those 3 years, I mean, you know, again, timelines, whatever. You know, you could paint in 3 years. Some people have painted 3,000 miniatures. Some people in 3 years have painted 30 or 100 miniatures. Doesn't really matter, you know. But I've done enough in 3 years that I've painted now, I don't know, it's probably about 300-400 miniatures, I would say, in those 3 years. Of all different types of stuff, so I know a little bit about painting now. And I know a few like little techniques, so some of the slightly more intermediate to advanced techniques I've had a go at least. And if you've followed any of my social media accounts, you'll know that I've gone from being, you know, very basic tabletop standard, just getting some paint on there, to being like all right at it. So we're aiming for this basically. So there he is. That's what we're sort of aiming for. It's and I'll stick a decent picture in the video so you can see. But you know, that's a respectable tabletop standard. He looks all right. He's fine. So how long does it take me, your typical sort of intermediate painter, to paint like that, to paint that sort of standard? Well, I don't know. So I'm going to find out. So we've got a little timer here, and in a minute I'm going to start painting this guy, this dude, and we're going to see how long it actually takes me to paint them, to paint one miniature. And the reason I'm doing it is because at the minute I'm currently painting miniatures to completion. So I've changed tactic a little bit recently. So what I used to do is, if I was painting 40 guys, I'd paint, I don't know, all of the clothes first or whatever, or the hauberks or the tunics or whatever. I'd paint those first. So if, you know, say you've got 20 blokes and 4 of them are going to be red tunics, I'd paint all the reds first, and then I'd do all the blues, and I'd do all the browns. And obviously it takes a long time to get to the point where you've got a completed miniature when you're doing that process. Recently I've had a go at painting, basically starting from faces from scratch, and then with faces from scratch, and then painting all the way to a completed miniature. Which is, I suppose in some ways it will seem like a backwards way of doing it for batch painting, if you're going to paint a lot of blokes. But one thing I've quite enjoyed about it is that at the end of an evening, you know, like I find I can get through 2, 3, maybe 4 completed miniatures in one evening. And at the end of that evening, I've got something to show for it. I've got something to look at and take a picture of, you know, and think, oh, that's done. Without the basing, obviously. So that's what we're going to do. But I haven't actually looked at how long it's taken me to paint them. But I'm finding it a bit more fun anyway. It's quite fun to paint a miniature all the way up from the base coat you see in front of you to a completed dude. So we'll give it a go, and I'll time it and see how it takes, and we'll answer that question. So the miniature we're going to paint is a plastic gripping beast Saxon. He's obviously, as you can see, he's assembled and been glued together, and he's stuck on a penny base. So I've done all that already, and I've undercoated him in brown, and I've chucked a wash on him, which basically just brings out some detail and stuff and makes it a little bit easier and fun to paint. So I can see, you know, it's almost like an outline for where details are and stuff. And it also hides a few crimes sticking an all over wash on when you get in there. So without further ado, let's get going. So I'm going to put the timer on, and I've mixed some paints already, but from a previous paint job. But I'm going to mix some other paints as we go as well. Reason being, it's going to be a genuine reflection of, you know, the things you have to do. So it's a genuine reflection of how long it takes to paint one miniature. Right, off we go. I might speed this up at times. We'll see how we go. Right, timer's on. So the first thing I'm going to do, because like I said, we're painting faces first, is I'm going to stick a base coat on his face. So we'll get like layer 1 onto his face, which is using, what is it? It's Foundry paint, the Foundry system, which is kind of like you start with a shade, and you go to a mid-tone, you go to highlights. But I've mixed in a bit of Games Workshop into this. There's a really good Games Workshop flesh shade, can't remember what it is, flesh paint, no idea what it is. What is it? It's an old one, Citadel Foundation Talon Flesh, there you go. I mixed that into stuff because they find the Foundry paints are, they're good, but I find they're a tad red for my taste. So we're just gonna get that first sort of darker flesh tone on his face. I mean, I'm not trying to cover the whole thing. I'm just, because this is where the brown hides your crimes. If you want to be lazy, you know, the deep brown acts as a kind of, it's almost like your first coat in some circumstances on these historical miniatures, if they're a nice deep brown. It's funny as I suddenly feel massively under pressure because there's a timer and a camera on, whereas normally, you know, I wouldn't even think about it, which is quite interesting. And you'll notice that I've started painting flesh first. So I always, well, as of very recently, I've now started on any miniature, I paint any sort of flesh first, face and hands. Previously I used to do that last. I don't know why, but I did. But a couple of people at my local group have said, we'll try it the other way around, because then, you know, you've got one of the hardest bits done, and the tone of the face can sometimes sort of set the path for the rest of the miniature, and you can get a more complete look if the first thing you do is paint his face, because his or her face, because then you have a character and you bring out almost like you bring out the personality and the colour in the face, and that might influence what you do with the rest of the miniature. So we've got a very quick rough paint job there onto the hands and face. One problem I am finding is that I'm using one of these wet palettes, which I don't know, I may well explain at another time. If you don't know what one is, give it a Google, but it's basically a form of palette that keeps your paint wet through water seeping through a piece of paper, and this wet palette is a little bit too wet. Hence I'm wicking off a lot of paint at the back of my hand just to get it a bit, just to calm it down a bit, because it's very fluid at the minute, which is giving me a few problems. And like I said, this is supposed to be a genuine reflection of how long it takes me to paint one miniature, so that's a typical sort of problem. Right, that's base coat done of his face. Right, moving up now to first highlight basically on the face. I'm going to try and dry this paint out a bit, because again it's very wet. It's too fluid. It's just that little bit too... Right. And then we're going to try again. Okay. But now I'm just sticking some very basic highlights in to the face. Just a few spots where light would fall from above onto the face. Create a light shade. On it goes. And the hands as well. Now, on these miniatures, this left hand here is tucked in like that because that's meant to take a shield. So there is some plastic shields. So, full disclosure, this guy will eventually probably have a shield. I'm not going to paint the face of the shield. It will be a transfer. But yeah, he will have a shield at some point, I'd imagine. Just to confess. Right. Sort of happy-ish with that for now. And we'll polish this off with fresh paint number 3 on the face, which is a much brighter and lighter flesh, and it's just going to go on the very tip of his nose, just around the eyes or something, you know, just the very light highlights. This isn't meant to be a painting tutorial about how I paint stuff. I wouldn't pretend to be snazzy enough to tell you how to paint a face. I'm just explaining what I'm doing and how it takes me to do it, so I'm just not saying you have to do it like this or this is the way to do it. In fact, please don't do it like this because there probably is a better way, but I'm just tapping on a few very bright highlights. And I can sort of see an expression in their face and a bit of character coming through a little bit now after that early sort of watery mess I had briefly there. So the back of the knuckles of the hand. Just give his hand a bit of life. And it's a bit of a watery job, and it's not the best I've done out of this batch, but you can see we do have a face appearing. Last thing I'm going to do on that is I'm going to use a wash. It's another old Citadel wash. It's called Ogren Flesh. Just go in the eye sockets there and in the ridges. And what that does is it just sort of, again, it sort of ties things together a little bit, and it goes into the recesses and it calms down some of the, and almost sort of blends together some of the highlights I've put in, and just sort of settles them down a little bit. It makes them look less contrasty, and sort of so the sort of transitions, if that's a word, the differences between the colours isn't too obvious, and it all looks a bit neater. There he is. We have a Saxon. Right, so that's face. Now we're going to do some of his hair, and this man has a lot of cool hair, as you can see. What are we going to do with that? Let's just give him a simple, because he's already undercoated in brown. Let's be lazy, slightly lazy about it, and we'll give him a sort of light brown, a simple light brown highlight, because he's already got a wash and a dark brown on there, so you know. I have got 40 of these fellas to paint, so not all exactly like this, obviously, but 40 from this set. So let's just stick a very simple light brown on the highlights of his hair. Again, this is a bit watery, but we'll live. What's this paint? I think this is a Vallejo paint, one of the many Vallejo's many very useful browns. Just giving him a bit of texture around the beard and the edges of the head and stuff. Alright, good. Okay, now then. One thing I will say about these Griffin Beast plastics, and this is not a sponsored post. They've not sent me this for free, I wish. I bought them, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago maybe. They're very good sculpts. They're very easy and fun to paint, and they look good. Winning combination, and the hair is great because it looks properly like hair, but there's also some nice kind of like clear ridges for you to pick out highlights and stuff on. So painting one of these heads is quite straightforward. It's quite easy to make them look quite good. It's not a headache to sort of bring the face to life. It's quite simple. There we go. We got some hair and a face. Fine. What are we on? 10 minutes. Good. And that is one of the most complicated bits of the model done already. And it took 10 minutes. Fine. It took a moderately competent painter 10 minutes. While still talking on this video. So that's not too bad. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start mixing some paint because we're going to paint a big Saxon tunic thingy. I'm going to do it something that shows it reasonably well for you on the camera, which is we're going to give him a sort of ochre, toned down, dark agey red. Similar principle. These are Vallejo paints, and we're going to start with a dark red called, for people that give a monkeys, it's called Hull Red. It's a very good red. It's a really dark base red. So if you're going to go up to a nice bright red or a rich red, it's a good starting point, that one. And it's a lovely, it dries a lovely matte, semi-matte finish with a tiny sheen to it. Not too much, it's good. Oh, right. Bit thick, so I'm going to add in a bit of water in. I'll probably do another video at some point that talks about how much water to add to different paints and paint thickness and all that stuff. Because if you're a beginner, which this channel is kind of aimed at, or an intermediate, which we're definitely aimed at, then paint thickness between brands is not a complicated subject, but it is an unpredictable and surprising thing if you're a beginner. You wouldn't think that brand X's dark red would be so much more thick and sort of opaque than brand Y's dark red, which makes a big difference on something this tiny. This is too thick still, so I'm going to add a bit more. It's not really moving around much, it's a bit too thick for my liking, so it's a little bit more water in the brush. Off we go, and what I'm doing here is I'm just sticking down one layer of dark red. And somewhere around here, because you've probably heard enough from me at this point, I'm probably gonna shut up and I'll speed up the video to double speed. So you're not watching me paint a tunic and talk nonsense for too long. Right, so that's his base of his tunic done. So now what I'm going to do basically is I'm going to just do another coat on the tunic and just bring it up a little bit, and I'm mixing a brighter Vallejo red in with that original base coat. So I'm mixing the Hull brown with, I think it's imaginatively called red by Vallejo. Just to get a bit of depth going. Don't want to make it too thick again, use a bit more water. Don't want to go all the way up to the red, but I don't want it to be too dark so that nothing's going on with the contrast. Way too much paint on that brush. What a mess. What a total mess. Okay. That's alright. Thankfully, the paint is still reasonably wet because I used quite a lot. So it's blending together alright on there without making too much of a mess. So it's looking pretty neat. That's working okay. We are making quite a big jump from a browny red to a red red. And I was a bit worried it was going to look a bit messy, but it's alright. It's fine, we'll live. This man is not here to win a golden demon. He's here to, I don't know what he's going to do. He's probably going to play Clash of Spears and get murdered by Vikings is probably what he's going to do eventually. Or something similar. He might have a game of Lion Rampant or Saga as well, perhaps. But he's basically here to be part of a band of about 40 guys that's going to go out, fight a lot, and is going to die many times over. He's not a commander, so and he's certainly not going to win me anything. So he's just here for fun and wineskins is what he's here for. So there we go. That's nearly done already. We're just chucking down some simple highlights on the top. We're not messing around too much. We're not obsessing. We're just making sure that the colours are right and they're in the right places. But that is it. Good. And because I've got the colour right, I don't have to faff about to get a reasonable blend and level of sort of detail in the highlight there. So we're all good. And that contrast isn't too dramatic at the moment, as you can see, but it's all right. Got we on 18 minutes. Good, right. Going all the way up to the red now. It's probably going to be a little bit too red, but I'm just going to do tops to shoulders. Again, the paint's still wet, so I can muddle it in there and not have some kind of horrendous clash between the layers. Just muddle it, muddle it, muddle it, muddle it. There we go. Muddle, 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 muddle. We're not trying to get anything super creamy here. We'll leave that to people better than me. We're just trying to get some kind of perception of light and depth and realism to him, We're just trying to bring him to life in a neat way. Think of it that way, And there he goes. Just onto the ridges, some nice ridges in these models by Griffin Beast. It's nice and easy to pick out spots to get a highlight in. There we go. That's a bit of a messy down here. I'm probably going the wrong way with that. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm just doing it badly. There we go. That's better. On the front. Okay, nearly there. He looks okay. There's 3 layers gone on there in 5 minutes, and he's fine. Next thing we're going to do is just have a little look at kind of his belt and things. you know, can I get away with leaving that as it is because it's a nice brown with a wash on? I'm going to say yes, because remember, we're just trying to do a decent tabletop. And then we've got a couple of other things to look after. So we've got these little bits of, I don't know, tunic leggings or whatever you want to call them, hose. And then we've got his sort of wraparound boots, his sort of cloth top boots kind of thing, and he's got his actual boots on there. And we don't want to leave all that one colour because it's kind of obvious, so we do need to sort of do something with that. So I'm going to use the same light brown I used on his outrageous hairstyle. Just bring his hose to life at the front a little bit there. Again, just letting the base coat, letting that dark brown that's over everything do the work a little bit in these situations when you're trying to paint 40 models in less than 40 years, you know, just letting the simple cheats and things do the work is what I do in some places. So now it looks like he's wearing a pair of trousers, good. Then we've got the question of, is fun little bits of material wraparound, don't know, bit trickier, don't really know what colour that would be. But it being the Dark Ages and it being lower half, it's probably going to be a brown. But let's do his boots, his booties first, his nice little tootsies. And again, you know, in real life they probably would be some sort of form of brown down there, I'd imagine. He's not going to be wearing a pair of hush puppies or anything. So using that light brown, I'm just going to get some dark brown in some clever places there. Just on the insides of the soles and things, the inside of the shoe, sorry, and the under half of the shoe, or the bottom half kind of thing. Just to lift it a bit, make it look a little less 2D in places. And then we've got this sort of puzzle of these ridged, I don't know what they are, socks? I don't know, they're not socks, are they? We do need to do something with them. I've got a bit of an ochre yellow here, which I might have a quick go with, see what that looks like. It's probably a bit too bright if I'm honest. Yeah, that's going to be a mess. We won't use that. What will we use? What will we use? We'll use a much lighter brown. Notice that the answer in painting before the late medieval period is often brown, or a tone of brown, or ochre. Yeah. If in doubt, find a sensible brown. Alright, we'll just use a slightly light brown again, and just take these up. I'm not going to go every single ridge, because I will be here for an hour, and you will be long gone. So I'm just going to, again, just quickly go over where the light would hit in the middle there. Just go around the back. Just bringing it up a little bit. And we have some socks, kind of. It's a bit too obvious there. So I'm just going to tidy that slightly. There he is. Right, last two things. 24 minutes, not bad. It would be nice to get done in some 20 something, but I don't think I'll quite manage that. So the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little pattern on his tunic quickly, because that's very typical of Saxon era. I'm going to use a very off-white called Bone White, a Vallejo job, again, Vallejo paint. And for some of these previous dudes, I've done some reasonably complex, like little square and triangular patterns and stuff. And for this guy, let's just do a little sort of tooth mark all the way around the bottom. We'll just give him something there, without getting too fancy, just so we can see that he's not so lowly that he can't afford some bone white tooth marking on his tunic. He's a man with some fashion sense. Just keeping it evenly spaced so there's something there. Because remember, there's 40 of these blokes. And if you think I'm going to sit here and paint 40 perfect, multiple sort of faceted designs on the edge of every single one of those 40 tunics, then you're wrong. So we'll just give this guy some toothy marks. Alright. Don't even do it there, because he's going to have a shield there. Just give him a bit round here. There we go. If I wanted to be really fancy and detailed with this, I could go back and highlight the pattern too, to bring it up even more. But again, like I said, there's 40 of these dudes. And we ain't got time for that. If he's a leader or something, of course I'm going to give him a nice pattern. A nicer pattern. But he's not. He's here to sacrifice himself on many a tabletop, so. There he goes. Right. So he's got something there. Alrighty. Last job. Bit of metal. Where are we? Actually, no, we're not going to use that. We'll use, you can see this, there we go. Vallejo acrylic metal colour, steel. It says airbrush colours. No, not necessarily. It's absolutely fine for a brush, not a problem. It goes on like you're colouring in. It's amazing. Highly recommended for a metal paint. This is I think this is a Vince Venturella recommendation. Vince Venturella is a YouTuber. If you don't know who he is, look him up. He's great. He mainly paints Warhammer and fantasy type stuff. He's extremely good. He's won many more awards than I would ever dream of winning. And he's got lots of advice better than mine about which paints specifically to choose for specific jobs. And this is something I picked up from him. Is this steel Vallejo acrylic airbrush paint? As you can see, flies on, self-settles on, and just sits there. It's not thick or mucky or gooey or sticky or, you know, uneven. It's really consistent and it just flies on. And there you go. He's done. What are we on? 28 minutes, 29, we'll call it 29, look at that. So in less than half an hour, and I'll put some better pictures of this man up for you on the video about now. In less than half an hour, we have a semi-respectable tabletop standard miniature. And if he graced a battlefield, you'd think, yeah, that's good. He's all right, you know, he's believable. He's not perfect, but he's a good standard of tabletop. He's perfectly good. And me with not much skill, 3 years worth of learning stuff off the internet, can do that in less than half an hour. Granted, there are a lot of them left to paint, but it's not something that, you know, with a bit of practice, you can't knock out a perfectly decent looking miniature that anybody would be happy to have on a table fairly quickly once you've done a little bit of practice. So that's that. I hope you learned something from that. I did. I've learned that it takes me, you know, just under 30 minutes to paint a miniature to a standard that I'm happy with, which is possibly slightly less than I thought it would be. So that kind of answers your question, or a question. It takes a half-competent man, less than half an hour, to paint something that looks all right. Because time in this hobby is a big thing, because, you know, it's often a marathon, not a sprint. It's something that you know, you're not going to get an army in a week. Unless you have no job and an unnatural amount of patience. It's just not going to happen. So then the question becomes, well, how long does it take me? If I'm just starting out and I think, well, that looks time consuming. Yes, it is. It is time consuming, but it's fun time, particularly when you get to the point where you've got a bit of practice and you think, okay, I know a few things. So there's no reason not to give it a go. And if I can paint something that looks all right in half an hour, then literally anyone can. All right, thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. How long does it take you to paint something that you're happy with? I'm fascinated to know. You know, comment down below this video. Let me know how long it takes you to paint something that you're happy with, to get something that you consider an acceptable tabletop standard. Not something that you can enter a competition with. It's something you think, oh yeah, that's good. Have you ever timed it? Have you ever worked it out? How long does it take you? How long do you think it is acceptable to spend painting a guy? Maybe you thought that took me ages and you think it's ridiculous. Maybe you can knock something out like that in 5 minutes. There are probably people that can, in fact. Let me know. I'm fascinated to know, and tell us how you did it. Bye for now. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm obliged to say that because it's a YouTube video. But it does help me massively as I'm trying to get this going and sort of build a sort of library of stuff up that people are going to bother to watch and enjoy and learn from. We're going to get more people painting these cool miniatures and playing these cool games. So thanks a lot. See you later.